It's called the 5 stages of focused leadership. And the 5 stages basically sequentially help build foundationally skill sets and different ways of thinking in leaders so that they, number one, transition from this doing mindset themselves of, I'm the best at it, so let me do it, to starting to leverage systems and develop systems and processes and procedures that can be shared with others, can be taught to others, can be handed off to others, that can be used as a resource so you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you do something.
And probably how long have you been in business now?
Actually, I have been in business. It'll be 33 years in August. I will have been in business. Yeah.
Congratulations. What has that journey been like for you starting your own business and working with leaders and business owners?
I love it. I love it. I knew from the time that I was probably 22, 23 that I wanted to do my own thing, but I didn't know what it was. And so it's been evolutionary over the past several decades. And it started as a training company in the last 10 years. The last 8 years in particular is really focused on I'm doing less training and really have focused more on the consulting side, the advisory work, strategic planning, succession planning, and then a lot of the executive coaching, one-on-one to one to group, to really help companies, help leaders, help business owners, help boards of directors understand how to do their jobs a bit more effectively. And a key element of that, Rebecca, is helping them to identify what they need to focus on next to maximize their physical and intellectual resources and that of their teams to really do what matters and just not keep throwing mud at the wall and hoping something sticks.
That is really important. I can understand from a leadership perspective and when you're responsible for many people and teams, how easy it is to be distracted or to lose focus or not sure where you're supposed to put focus on. And I imagine you've seen a lot of patterns or trends as you've worked with businesses. So I'm curious, is there one thing that you would highlight as a pitfall or a trap that leaders can fall into when it comes to working with their teams, whether it is succession planning or development or goal alignment, something along those lines?
It's it's a lot of the things that you just mentioned, and I'll just sum it up in a little bit differently. A trend that I'm seeing in conversations that I'm having now with leaders, and these are not just new leaders; these are often experienced leaders and individuals within the C-suite, the executive office, is to what I said before, is not allow the pressures of the myriad of changes coming at them right now overwhelm them to the point of either distraction, so they freeze, or they get too anxious and they get too many things going at the same time that they become counterproductive because they can't tell what's working and what's not working. So a trend that I'm seeing right now is helping experienced to new leaders identify what is the most important thing or things that you should be doing to maximize impact, maximize the results for the resources that you have to put into it. And it's as basic as that, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Sometimes it is the simplest of things, but it can take the most amount of effort or energy, I find. Where do we even begin
Hmm.
when it comes to clearing away the overwhelm? I know, as leaders, we work with our team members who are overwhelmed, but when it comes to ourselves, how do we handle that? Who do we go to? Someone like yourself, obviously, but where do we even begin?
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's the challenge. And for some executives that have never, talked with somebody on the outside, initially it's like, well, they're not going to understand my world. And it's a matter of, when you've got a clientele and a client base over several decades, you get to learn their world and you've been in their world. In my situation, I've been in the boardrooms, I've been in the C-suite meetings, I've been in the strategic planning sessions, I've seen how they operate. I work with them, I roll up my sleeves and I work with them. So it is having some empathy for the situations that they're in, but at the same time, it's also being able to hold a mirror up in front of their faces and saying, What you are doing right now is exactly what frustrates you that your division directors are doing or that your VPs are doing. And so let's hit the brakes a little bit and take a step back and identify what do they need of you and where do they need you to focus so they know where they need to focus.
And there's a lot of feedback and insight gathering involved. How do you help support that when you're working with clients?
To help them realize they're human and that they're going to make mistakes and that my job isn't to make them feel bad or embarrass them. My job is to help them succeed and help them identify for the best of intentions what might I be doing wrong. And how do I identify that and course correct so I don't keep going down the wrong path.
Are there any particular frameworks or models that you like to employ to help structure that kind of session or that development of awareness?
Well, there's a couple different things that I can do with a client, and I mean, one of them is, again, it depends on what we're working on. One of them is kind of looking if we're talking about strategic planning. One of the exercises that is fun is an exercise to identify what do we need to stop doing. And it sounds pretty basic, but there's a lot of ownership and a lot of emotion that can come out in some things. And when an individual or a team has been working on something intently for a couple months to several years, when the decision to kill it comes about, it's tough. But if that revenue stream is no longer aligned with the mission of the organization, is no longer aligned with the strategic goals of the targeted clientele you're going after, the customer base, is no longer supporting the outcomes that are non-negotiable, it has to go. And so it's a matter of, kind of working through that exercise, that activity. Something else that another activity, this is kind of a strategic planning. I was working with a couple managers from a client today on this, is really helping them to get better at evaluating what is the ROI for the initiative that we're working on. Understanding that simply because you're putting a lot of effort into it doesn't equate to value and ROI on the output. And for many managers that's pretty obvious, but for some managers, particularly ones that have been elevated into a more senior position, they've not had to think like that yet. So it's been a learning curve, and it was a learning curve for the two managers I was talking with today. Another framework that I share with a number of clients, and these are with clients when we're trying to help them understand how to start thinking differently and then behaving differently as a leader to be more intentional so that they are, number one, themselves looking forward, but number two, being better able to develop their team members so they have a more skilled team with depth and agility is a leadership model that I developed. It's called the 5 stages of focused leadership. And the 5 stages basically sequentially help build foundationally skill sets and different ways of thinking in leaders so that they, number one, transition from this doing mindset themselves of, I'm the best at it, so let me do it, to starting to leverage systems and develop systems and processes and procedures that can be shared with others, can be taught to others, can be handed off to others, that can be used as a resource so you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you do something. Can also identify areas for improvement. You start creating documentation and pet tasks, and then transitioning to, suddenly if you are now responsible for others, how does that mind shift look? And how do you now stop doing and start delegating and leveraging a team, which is a huge mindset shift for individuals. And then transitioning from that to how do you, now that you have a team, and let's say that you've got comfortable with managing a team, you know how to leverage a team. How do you start thinking strategically and learning to lead and anticipate what's coming next and teeing your team up for it so you are not reacting but you're proactive. And so you're starting to pull your team out of this constant firefighting mode into getting much more intentional and proactive and effective. And you start burning so much wasted time and resources because you're much more proactive and focused looking forward. And you transition then into stage 4 leadership, which is where you really start looking at, given where we are going as a company, as an organization, as a division, whatever it is, and knowing what's strategically ahead of us, because we now have a strategic plan. We have a line of sight. What does that mean for my company or for my team or for my division? How might we need to restructure? And what type of talent do I need to either develop within or acquire externally? So stage 4 is where we're really looking at developing that team of depth and agility to take the organization forward. And then the 5th stage is looking at, regardless of what this transition is, stage 5 is where we learn to move on. So either we transition to a new position, we might transition out of the company, we might simply transition responsibilities from me to you, Rebecca. And however extreme that transition is, stage 5 leaders ensure that the transition and responsibilities from me to my successor is seamless. Because when that can occur, that tells me as a consultant that what the individual who enabled that seamless transition to his or her successor had done is made sure that that successor understood, where is this position, where is this project, where is this team, where is this organization headed, what is the agility of that team, what is the depth of that team, are they all in alignment with the strategic plan, do they know their role, does the team have the skills they need to do their individual jobs? Do they know how to leverage one another? And are there systems in place to support them in doing that? So you've walked back down through all of those 5 stages to provide the foundational work to allow transitions to occur seamlessly. So that's one of the models that I use.
I love that, and I'm glad you broke it down for us so other people can get that context and understanding. Level 3 is particularly relevant for me and my team right now as we look to be more proactive, and so that resonates a lot with me. But then level 4 and that sort of readiness, if you will, I think that is maybe a good word to describe it. We're kind of on the cusp of that, or
Mhm,
into that too. I appreciate you breaking that down. I want to go back and ask about ROI because I feel like I've not talked with anyone about that at all. And data can be a little daunting for
mhm,
some folks, especially when we're asked by our bosses, by our leaders, by owners of the company, what's the ROI on that?
mhm,
Even more so when the project perhaps doesn't have necessarily a quantitative way of evaluating, or at least we don't think there is. I don't want to assume.
mhm.
How do you help people unlock the ROI and calculate that? Maybe, for example, something like a training program where maybe the feedback and the insight is a little bit more qualitative. It can be, especially for those of us that maybe data analysis isn't really our thing. And so now as a leader, we're tasked with this, seek and find, go find the ROI.
Mhm.
How do we approach that?
It's a great question, and I like the way that you phrased it. And so the way that I handle it with a lot of my clients, because a lot of managers are not, they're not finance people, and there are many situations where you don't have quantitative data to calculate a true ROI in the mathematical formula. So I ask the question, what's the impact? Have we moved the dial the way that we really intended with this initiative in the first place? So as an example, I'll share sanitized version. One of the client groups I was working with today is a government entity, and they provide support services to individuals with physical and cognitive challenges to help them gain skills so they can be employed. So one of the things that they do is they obviously try to ensure individuals are entering the training programs so that they can obtain the certifications or training they need to become employable in various occupations. Well, on their strategic plan, one of their main goals was to increase the number of people in that pipeline to get training, which sounds like a noble goal. But I asked them, I said, is that really the outcome that you're looking for? Because what I anticipate you really want to have happen is you want to have a lot of people successfully completing the training and getting their certifications so they are employable, and that you can place more people with the proper credentials and the training in the job market to add to the economic viability of the state. And Just that something as basic as identifying where is the real deliverable. Is the real deliverable increasing the pipeline, or is the real deliverable increasing the number who are satisfactorily completing the program and employable so that they can be placed? And we need to move that deliverable over. And so all of these activities to increase the number of people coming into the pipeline, that's needed because let's say that we've got, I don't know, 500 people coming in the pipeline. And if we're only successfully having, say, 150 at the other end, then that tells me we got to figure out what's happening during that training process where we have such a big drop off rate. We
Mhm.
might have poor training. We might have individuals coming into the pipeline who are not suited for the programs that we have. So we may need to off ramp them and provide them different resources someplace else so that we're not bottling up our resources with individuals that aren't going to have a good success with us. So it starts to create clarity about what are we really trying to accomplish versus the tasks that we know we need to do more of this, but we haven't clarified what the outcome really over here is that we're trying to
Makes a lot of sense, and makes me realize too. Whenever I'm looking at data, I really am finding more questions when I'm looking at data like that.
Mhm.
What you're saying brings to mind maybe an understanding that we're not simply after volume, but we're after value. And if we can look at our metrics and what we've decided we're going to measure, then we can get a little bit better, well, to your point, clarity, but we can get a little bit deeper insight and figure out what are the better questions to ask ourselves or our team for that impact. So appreciate you leading us through an example because we might already be doing it already in our workplace, but I imagine there's still a focus needed, which brings us back to what you're talking about originally, and that's figuring out what is our focus as leaders? How are we driving our team forward for that impact?
Mhm.
I'm curious, is there a misconception that you have found with CEOs, business owners around where they should be putting their individual focus and where you have to re steer them and pivot them in the right direction?
It depends upon the individual. And I say that because there are just some executives who really like to get into the weeds. And there are others that really prefer to stay at the 80,000 foot level. And so it's a matter of working with them to identify, given the role they have, what should they be doing? But in addition to that, given the team they have, where does the team need them? And I say that because sometimes the team that you have are great, but they're not great enough yet. So they may need the CEO to be a bit more hands-on to clarify where that next level of thought needs to be. On the other hand, they may have an excellent team, and because the CEO is hovering, unintentionally, the team can't perform as strongly as they otherwise could. So then it becomes a situation of what they need you to do is get up to 10,000 feet and start looking at the horizon some more. Get up to 30,000 feet and look at the horizon. And they will keep you apprised of things that you need to be aware of so you're not blindsided by anything. They don't need you hovering because you're not adding value to them. What they need you to do is get out ahead of them and clear roadblocks.
Hmm, that's great. It makes me think of that agility you mentioned earlier and probably a self awareness, knowing when to zoom in and knowing when to zoom out, depending on the needs at any given time. And I wanted to ask about something else you mentioned, succession planning. I'm sure there's a tie in there with the different levels of leadership and knowing whether someone's moving on or they're being promoted. What are you doing as the leader to make sure that there aren't any gaps in the company or that people aren't taking on too much as other people are shifting and transitioning in their role? So where does one start with that sort of planning, even if it's maybe even the leader themselves is learning where to zoom in and zoom out from their responsibilities? How do you approach that in a way that encompasses the whole company, but then also focuses in on the individual role that you're preparing or planning for?
Well, the typical approach, the ideal approach, is if I've been working with a client and we've updated or created a strategic plan for them, we now have a line of sight where the organization, the company is going to go over the next 3, 5, or more years. With that, we can then sit down and say, okay, so how are we going to make this happen? Who's going to do the work? And so then it's a matter of looking at team by team, department by department, region by region, whatever, looking at the org chart and figuring out, number one, is this the right org chart given what this division now needs to do over the next 3 or 5 years? Do we need to restructure it? And if it's restructured, then what does that mean for the positions within that division? Given the people we currently have, how well are they able, number one, to do their current jobs? But given what we know will be expected of them in this enhanced organization, what skills will their position require of them that they may not have now? And how do we start creating a path forward for them to develop those skills, gain that experience, or move them into a position that's going to better support them and their capabilities, and they're going to be more successful in supporting us? So we tie it to the plan. So there's a line of sight and there's more objectivity in how we are guiding employees into positions where it's going to be more successful for them and more successful for us. So that's a big part of it is getting clarity on why are you asking this individual to learn something different or to learn something new. It's just not it's because Liz wants you to do that. It's because no, that's the company is going and that's what's going to be expected of the position that you currently have going forward. And there's no promises in the future, but position will be this in the future. And if you want to go into that new position, these are the skills you're going to need to have.
Mm. Having that kind of a conversation with the individual that you're aiming to prep, I imagine, is really important and might need to be treated with some delicacy too if they don't possess all the skills and you want to get them there. So, are you having that conversation with your client and that individual? Are you coaching your clients on how to have conversations, and what would a approach to a conversation like that look like?
Quite often, I'm having that conversation with the CEO or the business owner, whoever the most senior person is. But then internally, they have those conversations with their team members. But a lot of these conversations are not surprises because most of the exec team or the C-suite have been in many of the planning sessions, so they know what's coming. And it's just a matter of understanding for them individually what that might look like.
That's a great point. I've heard from others sometimes the maybe it's regret from a past experience or something that their company just hasn't ever really provided. Either it's one-on-one sessions that they missed or some kind of growth snapshot or benchmarks, even expectations in their role. So if you work with clients who aren't providing that with their team members for their team members and not really paying attention to the development side, how would you encourage leaders to start paying attention and start helping support their employees, their team members in a development track that's suited to them, but then still benefiting the company? Because it feels like it's really important. I'm biased, so I'm trying not to be, but it's really important. And yet I keep hearing that people aren't getting that from their leadership. If anyone out there is listening and they're like, yeah, I probably should be doing that, Liz, where do I begin? How would you counsel and encourage them?
So, to your point, Rebecca, this is a ubiquitous problem because for whatever reason, I believe many managers still believe it's HR's responsibility to identify the training needs of people. And the biggest thing that I share with managers is you don't need to have in training and development. You don't need to have HR insights to understand the competencies that people need to develop. Don't worry about the buzzy HR or talent development terms. here's how I work with my clients on this. Let's say, Rebecca, you're one of my employees, and I hear this podcast, and I'm like, hmm, I don't know. Rebecca needs some training. The question is, what does Rebecca do in the course of her work with you that frustrates you because she doesn't do it better? Does she not understand budgets? Does she not communicate clearly? So you end up having 3 or 4, text messages going back and forth trying to figure out what she's trying to say. Keep it really basic. And you don't need a laundry list. It can be one thing, it can be 2 things. But what is your team member not able to 100% independently and competently do for themselves given the position they have? And whatever that is, it's probably a frustration for you because you're like, oh my God, I don't believe she doesn't do this. I don't understand why she can't do this. It doesn't matter why she can't. So that inability or that lack of understanding is a training opportunity, is a coaching opportunity, is an exposure opportunity, is a mentoring opportunity. And it's closing those gaps or those frustration points so that your team members can greater the likelihood that they can do the jobs they're being paid to do 100% independently and competent.
I love that, Liz. That's a great way to offer an example. And I'm thinking back, how many times have I been frustrated with a team member and realized that's probably my responsibility. The frustration, they don't know. And they don't know, hopefully, they don't know that I'm frustrated, right?
Mhm.
We as leaders have to be responsible for caring for our people. And that extends to and beyond the training and development. So I love that. If we're feeling the frustrations, first our problem and responsibility to then appropriately address that with them and give them the tools that they need. So
Yeah,
I appreciate yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. If I could just share a story real quick, because that just reminds me of something. So years ago, I was giving a workshop and it was on some leadership topic. I don't remember what it was. And at one point, I was asking the participants if there was anything else that they wanted me to cover. And a woman in the group shared that she said, I've got a great team. We get along so well. They're amazing, but I just don't think they're performing as well as they really should be. And she goes, "What do I do?" And my question to her was, if your team is so amazing and you get along so well, why don't they already know that they're not performing as well as you think they could or should? And she went, like, I have to tell them? Well, it's what we were just talking about. If you don't let individuals know that there are gaps in what you really need them to do or expect them to do versus what they're doing, then by default, we are condoning the current level of performance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been in that situation many times where you realize I should have had that difficult conversation a lot sooner. And it's my responsibility, my fault for letting it continue past a point. And now as a leader, you have to deal with the consequences or the ramifications of that.
Mhm.
And remember that you're talking to a person who maybe had no clue, maybe you had a brief pass by kind of combo, but you did not give clear expectations or any kind of clarity on where you needed that to develop. And so that's a great reminder. I appreciate you sharing that story with us too. What when it comes to any kind of situation working with clients where you feel a resistance within the company, I've been curious. I always like to ask this question of some of our guests because especially if they're working with clients and you're not a part of the company and you're coming in as a third party and you're working with them and you get resistance either from the CEO or from other executive leaders, how do you help navigate a situation like that, which could put a roadblock in your progress or the company's progress in working with you?
That's a really great question. So, one of the things that I am very clear on with my client agreements is scope of work. Now, it's not to say that I'm rigid and I like, that's not what it says, but I am very clear on what my role is and what their role is. I don't have decision-making authority, they do. My job in whatever I'm doing, whether it's strategic planning, facilitation, succession planning, projects, leadership development, my role primarily is to facilitate conversations, to offer advice, to share insights, to challenge, to cause them to have conversations they may not want to have. but I don't make the decisions, they do. And what I can do is I can share that there may be that there I would have concerns if they followed path B instead of A, because the likelihood of X, D, and J happening are going to go dramatically higher if they follow path B versus path A. But still, the choice is theirs. So when there's resistance, it's their decision. I can throw up some flags, but it's their decision. If their resistance is impeding the project that I've been contracted to fulfill, again, I just simply make them aware that I can't do the next phase of my required contractual service because of your decision here. So I've never had a conflict with a client. It's never ever gotten into a really a difficult situation because I'm very upfront about it. And like I said, it's their decision. And I know that going in and they know that.
That's great. It's a good reminder that whoever we're working with, if you are the decision maker, then you're not putting all of the responsibility and onus on your consultant or the person you're working alongside. You have to be the ultimate decider of that. So
Mhm.
that's great to hear. And it sounds like your clients have a good understanding going in. But let's say someone's curious and they want to work with you. What's something that you would like new clients to know, or prospective clients that you would love them to know beforehand, that will make that process especially extra smooth and free of any kind of stress on their part? Because I understand, if you're exposing yourself and looking for those gaps, it could be quite overwhelming. So, is there a place that you want people to start, or is there information that you think that would be beneficial for them to have before they even start working with you?
That's a loaded question. I think that the thing that I try to share with any prospective client when we have an initial conversation is, even though there are certain models that I've used, there are certain processes that have worked well, nothing that I do is prescriptive. And I really try to ensure that what you believe you need help with, once we have a conversation and I can do some research, we need to make sure that what you believe you want help with is what you actually need help with, and that I'm in a position to be a person to do that. And if not, I will recommend somebody else, or I'll take myself out of it because I want to have fun and I want to be successful in this also. I also need my clients to know that I speak to them as candidly as I'm speaking with you and your listeners right now. I'm always respectful. I'm always polite. I'm always, honest. But I also am the one quite often, and I've had one client joke with me, I can't believe I pay you to do this. But I'm the one that will tell them things that nobody else can or will. Because if they would get irritated and fire me, I have other clients. It's not like I'm going to lose my job, but I've never had that situation, and I'm the one that will tell them things that quite often they may have had some members on their leadership team try to tell them, but they didn't articulate it in a way that the CEO got it. Or I might have a conversation with the family founder, the dad, and have a real candid conversation about the viability of his business if he passes it to his two sons. And it's a conversation that I have with him because he can't have it with his wife. So it's sometimes the conversations can be a little bit deep, but I'm not there to be a counselor. I'm there to be an outside voice who isn't mired in the day-to-day drama, and who and I'll candor Rebecca. I had one CEO of a company call, and he wanted just to talk, and he was talking about how the general counsel and his CFO would just go at it, and he was sharing all these examples, and like you, I just started laughing. And he's like, "Liz, it's not funny." And then he started laughing. And I said, "How much are you paying each of them every year?" And he goes, "Oh my God, this is why I called you, because this is insane, right?" And it's just a reality check that sometimes the things that they're so close to, they need an outside person to go, "That's, yeah, this is not acceptable. You don't need to be dealing with this."
Yeah, you offer a great perspective and lens for that business owner to be able to process things and see things with extra clarity or a different kind of discernment and understanding, which is wonderful. If you were to offer advice to anyone listening who is maybe on the cusp of a leadership opportunity or looking to strengthen their leadership, and maybe it's simply speaking to yourself from the beginning of when you started as a leader, what's a piece of advice or a learning lesson that you would share with that person to help them as they continue on their path?
I think I'll share the advice that I gave my oldest daughter when she first was asked to apply for a leadership role. And she's like, I don't know if I'm ready. And I told her, I said, at the crux of it, leadership is actually a lot easier than a lot of people think it is, in that if you simply follow through with what you say you're going to do it well. When you make mistakes, you admit it. When you tell your team, there's things I can't tell you right now, but when I can, I will. And then you follow through on that. When you hold team members accountable who are not performing well so that you free up productive space and time and air for your strong team members. And when you look ahead and you clear roadblocks for your team so that they're able to do their work without drama, without lack of resources, without whatever, I said, you're a leader. That's it. Don't make it more difficult than what it is. It's paying attention to your responsibilities, what your team needs of you, and clearing the road for them.
Great, Liz. That's wonderful advice. Like you said earlier, it can be easy. Doesn't mean it's lacking in effort,
Mhm.
but it can be that simple and that easy for us, and it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So I hope everybody hearing that really takes that to heart. How can we get in touch with you? Where would you like to connect with folks who want to work with you, learn more from you, and get that additional perspective?
I would love to have your listeners connect with me on LinkedIn. My handle on LinkedIn is at Liz Weber CMC, the best place to connect with me.
Awesome. Well, Liz, thank you so much. We'll have you linked below for everybody to follow. And I hope everybody listening does connect with Liz. Liz, this has been my honor and pleasure to have you. Thank you for your wonderful advice and sharing your experience with us on the Bad Bosses Great Leaders podcast. And thank you to all of our listeners, too. We'll catch you for the next episode.